everyone. With me today, I have the amazing Tonya Rebhahn. She's a wellbeing coach from chainbreakersmindset.com. Welcome, Tonya. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, very simple question. Where in the world are you?
I am in Wisconsin, USA.
Lovely. So anyone in the area, keep an eye out for Tonya. And Tonya, so you are a mindset wellbeing coach. You have your business, chainbreakersmindsetcoaching.com. Let's just talk about what is that and what do you do with that?
Sure. So I help people who have experienced trauma at some point in their life get to feeling better, because trauma can do so many things to you, not only mentally, but physically as well, which I found out in my own path. And ended up doing, actually, so not only am I certified in hypnotherapy, I'm certified in NLP, but also holistic nutrition, which might seem kind of like a odd combination to have, but there's a really strong connection between the mind and body. And I found out from experience that if you're mentally not healthy, you're not going to be healthy physically either. And I had a long journey with my health that ended up leading me to get those certifications.
I mean, first of all, that's amazing and well done, because I've done these certifications and they do take some time. For those who don't know, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, what first brought you to NLP? What made you interested in it?
Yeah, so it's kind of a long story. It goes back a ways. But how that came about is a little history with me. I grew up in a family that was broken, and I had a lot of trauma growing up. And as many people know, if you have a broken family, a lot of times for women, it makes them more likely to end up in a broken home later in life. I, at 19, ended up getting pregnant and marrying a very, very physically and mentally abusive man. So what happened is I was with him for a total of 7 years, married 5 years. I had a 5-year-old and 2-year-old at the time when I finally left. But it got to the point where he had come home one day, well, it's 3 a.m, from being out all night drinking. And I, of course, couldn't sleep in that situation, wondering what he might be doing or who he might be doing it with. And I heard him come up the driveway that night, and I looked out my window and saw that the side of his truck was all smashed up. So I went outside and went to meet him, and as he was kind of staggering out the door of his vehicle, I asked him what he had done. And then I saw the change in his face come over, and it was a look in his face I had seen before, and I knew that that look meant I better get out of there quickly, because he wasn't happy with me questioning him. And so I went to head back to the house, and caught me from behind before I made it to the house, and took me down and got on top of me, and he hit my head against the concrete slab.
Gosh.
Then somehow I managed to break free of him. I tried to get into the house, and as soon as I got into the doorway of the house, he took me down again and he started strangling me. And my 5-year-old must have heard the commotion of us crashing in, and he came in, saw what his dad was doing, and ran and jumped on his back and started hitting him, trying to get him off of me, which made my ex get up, and he was trying to get him off the back. Once he did, then by the grace of God, he ended up just staggering off and passing out. So then I knew the time had come. We had to get out of there. We had to go for safety. So I just grabbed my 2 boys and their blankie, my purse, and we left. I first had to go to the hospital, and fortunately they helped me out there. They took some really good notes, and then they had called up a women's shelter because I didn't really have close family or friends to help me out in that situation, which was probably another reason why I stayed so long in that kind of scenario. And so they had called the women's shelter and told them I was on my way with my boys, and I never went back from that point, finally. But as you can imagine, that wasn't the end of my trials. I did end up having a 2-year custody battle that was hellish, but fortunately I did win full custody of my kids in the end. And I left with some PTSD situation also. And so I later had ended up, this was quite a while, several years after I had left him. All of a sudden, I had been working as a dental hygienist actually for 12 years at that point. All of a sudden, I started getting some really awful flu-like symptoms, which then led into me starting to have tremors. And then I started having some seizures at work. And I thought I had like MS or something like that. So I sought out several doctors, ended up eventually being in the neurologist's office. And she had asked me if I ever had any head trauma, in which I had told her about the scenario of what happened with my ex. And then she's like, well, PTSD can show up in many physical ways as well. I think maybe the best thing to do at this point would be to see a psychologist. So I went in, I was doing some therapy, but it wasn't helping me, I guess, as much as I would hoped it would. They threw some medications at me for anxiety and depression, and that just made me feel zombie-like, and I really didn't like that feeling. I wanted to be a present, good mother for my kids. So I started seeking out answers on my own. And while I was doing some research into like neuroscience type of things, I ran across what was called NLP and hypnotherapy. And I'd heard that some people who were not getting good results with the typical talk therapy were getting quick results with hypnotherapy and NLP. So I had started to do some of these exercises, and I was really noticing a change shortly after I started them for the better. While this was going on also, though, I was still having my physical symptoms, and I didn't think that it was just all in my head, all mentally related. I didn't doubt that maybe some of it was, but I thought there was still more to it. So during this whole journey, I also sought out another specialist for a second opinion. She ended up being from a Harvard grad, and she was a rare disease specialist. She was out of Atlanta, Georgia. So the bad part of this was, though, she did not take any insurance. It'd have to come out of my pocket. But she said she didn't take insurance because she didn't like insurance companies dictating the care she gave her clients, which I thought, well, maybe I'd get some better answers with that as well. So I took the trip down to Atlanta, Georgia. She ran a whole bunch of tests on me. And what I ended up finding through this whole journey is that I also was suffering from Lyme disease, neural Lyme disease with co-infections. Also in the genetic testing, they found out I had a rare genetic disease called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And even later, found out I had lupus as well. So I had this whole storm of things going on, which is what led me to keep searching and be an advocate for myself, and also what led me into the holistic nutrition. And so I had, while I was studying all these things, came across the ACE study. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I am. But let's tell everyone what it's about.
Okay, so the ACE study stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and it was put on by the CDC and Kaiser. And this was a study for 2 years and I think 17,000 patients. What they ended up finding is that there is a huge connection to children who have had any adverse experiences of like trauma in their past to have a much higher chance of having disease later in life. Like you're at a approximately 70 to 80% increased risk of autoimmune hospitalizations they found, and at like a 45% higher likelihood of chronic pain when you're an adult also. Those were just a few of the findings amongst many
I mean,
others.
there's so many things that puts you at a higher risk because of that childhood trauma. And it's quite shocking when you read the study, actually, just how extensive and how impactful. And we know that, those first 7 years of your life are really crucial. But until that
Absolutely.
study, you hadn't seen just what a difference it makes to your longer term well-being. So I think it's a really good study to look at. So thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, thank you. So that was what kind of led me down the rabbit hole of how strong the mind-body connection is, and truly it can have an effect on your physical well-being besides your mental well-being. So I had, wanted to work on the trauma factor with the NLP and hypnotherapy. And then also I knew it was going to take a little more than just that. So that's where I got into the holistic nutrition side of things, because I didn't want to be taking a whole bunch of medications that were really just Band-Aids and they don't treat the root cause of your issues. So that's kind of how that all came about, is really just me through using myself as a science experiment, so to speak, and learning so much about the mind-body connection. And through learning, I've made huge strides towards bettering myself, health, mentally and physically. And
I
so I
mean,
wanted to help others then.
and it's amazing. You're so well, positioned to do it because of your story you just shared. I want to know, obviously, that first moment of leaving, and this is something that you talk to, that many women struggle because they have nowhere to go. They don't know, and often that's the case. They're deliberately isolated for that reason,
Yes,
so they don't leave. So
right.
you had a bit of a make or break moment where you knew you had no option. What advice
Yes.
do you give to women now, though, who perhaps are on the fence and they deep down know they have to leave, but they've got nowhere to go, and they've got no friends, no family nearby, and it's huge. It's not easy, and people mustn't underestimate how difficult it is to leave. What advice do you have in those situations?
Yeah. So, there's always so much judgment when it comes to these abusive situations, because they're like, well, why does she stay with them? Well, I'll tell you my case to answer a lot of those whys people ask. I had 2 children with him, and his family was really wealthy in my situation. I come from nothing. I have no financial backing, no family backing, nothing. And I knew, for one, if I left, it would be me on my own having to battle his family and all their money in the court systems. And I
Sure.
didn't know how I would be able to uphold to that financially. I knew because he was so, well, aggressive, so possessive, that he wouldn't just let it go. He wouldn't just let
Mm,
me leave without there being, you know, more to it, which in my leaving, there was a lot of stalking. There was a lot of intimidation. So I wasn't wrong in that. um, and so you just don't know if they're going to come after you. When you have kids, you don't know if they are going to use the children against you. So these are all fears, the finances, the fear for your life. Those are all fears that make leaving not just an easy, yes, I'm going to go out the door. It doesn't end
mm,
there. It never ends there. But there is hope. And the sooner you do it, the better, because you don't know when that one time might be the last time for you. And so the sooner you can get out, the better. And there's always people out there, even if you don't have family or friends for support, there are people out there that will support you and help you. When you go to a place like a woman's shelter, it's not always comfortable. It's not always easy, but they have tons of support there for you. So they can give you directions on where your next step is, how you should handle it. And, it's a community of good people. So you find new friends when you're seeking to heal, when you're seeking to leave. There is always help if you look for it.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Now, you've also written a book, but under a pen name. So let's just talk about that for a moment. So what's the book about, and why did you choose a pen name?
Yeah, so I'll start out with the pen name part. Actually, it was a safety reason. I chose Ava James, just kind of made that up out of my head.
Lovely name.
And the publisher thought it sounded good. But because I still had, fears of repercussion of having my name and people looking me up from what I've experienced in the past with having my ex stalk me, things like that. I definitely did it from a safety standpoint. And I'm remarried. And so my husband, he also thought it was the best step. He just didn't want people, trying to find me or anything like that. So
yeah,
it definitely was a safety issue with the Ava James. And the book I had written during the COVID epidemic because I was torn apart seeing all of these people really mentally struggling from being locked up in their homes, kids not getting to go to school and see their families. And one day what really made me just decide to do it was I had heard a story about a 10-year-old committing suicide. And that just ripped my heart out. I'm like, 10 years old. How can this be happening at such a young age?
Yeah.
And the pandemic really just had some awful effects on, throughout the world on people mentally. So I decided I wanted to write a book that could give people just some simple tips on things that they could do at home to help themselves or their family members if they're seeing family members struggle from the pandemic, to help them out mentally and get a more positive mindset to help them through these hard times. And those same tips could help them throughout life.
And of course, your book's called The Real Pandemic anyway. So is it sort of the stories of those going through the pandemic, or is it just, as you say, people getting through it and how you help them?
I called it The Real Pandemic because I felt like the real pandemic was actually the mental health crisis going on, more so than COVID.
Than the actual thing. And I think you're right. And I think we're still seeing the tail end of that now. I know I was a school governor for a while, and coming out of COVID, our kids, I work with primary in UK, which is sort of 3 till 11, and I had the 7 to 11 age group. I had to think about it for a moment, trying to translate it into US numbers. But we had people joining who had never been in school, and they didn't know how to sit in a chair. They couldn't pay attention, but they didn't want to come to school. The social anxiety was better. And again, going back to your reference to the ACE study, we don't yet know what impact the pandemic is going to have on these children 10, 20, 30 years time. But we can already see the impact it's having on adults who live through it. And so there's a lot of things we need to put in place, I think, to make sure that we are remaining healthy and dealing with these problems before it gets too bad.
Yes, I totally agree. Yeah, it's kind of scary, and it'll be interesting to see what new studies come out and what we find out from it.
Definitely. Now, so with your, we talked a bit about the LMP and the hypnotherapy, and as you know, I do both as well. I think they're a great combination. So, and I love the fact you reference as a personal real life case study how NLP can help in areas that talking therapies can't. I think that's a really important distinction to make. I get very excited about neuroscience at the moment, well, in general. And what I love about it is we know so much more about how the brain works now. So that although talking therapies have a place, and for some people they're very effective, with things like neurolinguistic programming, with clinical hypnotherapy, because we understand how the brain works, we understand that we can change its patterns and change its behaviors. And that's what these two together do so well. So it's a really powerful combination, but also testimony to how it's worked for you as well.
Absolutely.
With the third part, though, something I don't do, which I find amazing and I think is brilliant, is the holistic nutrition. And you've already said that mind, body is connected, and I think everyone now is understanding that more again. What sort of changes or what things shocked you initially about the changes you had to make your own body function the way you wanted to, and how do you take that into your client work?
Yeah. So, one thing that I had learned through all of my study of health and the ACE study is where the nutrition really comes from and the trauma component together is because part of what is causing the health issues and the autoimmune disease is because, you have, well, there's something called the polyvagal theory. And so you have your sympathetic nervous system, which is kind of your fight or flight nervous system that, is our primal being of how we react to danger, stress. Well, those who have had trauma, they get stuck in this kind of fight or flight type of being. And so your body's in fight or flight, it's constantly releasing stress hormones like cortisol. And when you're in this stress situation, internal inflammation occurs. And so a lot of times what causes all of these health conditions is when your body is having all this internal inflammation going on. And a huge connection that also plays a role into this is then it gets they call your gut the second brain. And so you have all these good bacteria and bad bacteria in your gut. And when they get out of balance, that's when disease also can occur. They call it gut dysbiosis. But again, that usually is occurring because of this stress and inflammation that your body is under from all these hormones and everything else kind of going wire. And also it affects your immune system. When you have all these stress hormones and inflammation going on, your immune system is also thrown out of balance. So what I found is if you heal the underlying inflammation and your gut bacteria, then that will also help you heal these autoimmune conditions and other chronic diseases. So it's kind of a big circle, but it all has to do with underlying inflammation, essentially. So that's where the nutrition aspect comes in, is feeding the bacteria and the right nutrients so it can thrive in a healthy ecosystem in there, but also lowering the inflammation. And of course, there's many foods out there that raise your inflammation, further causing disease problems. So I had studied the types of foods that you would eat to lower your inflammatory effect. Also, you want to make sure you're not bringing in, if you have low-grade allergens, staying away from any type of foods that will trigger that, because that'll give even more inflammation. But basically using food as your medicine to lower the inflammatory process and give you the nutrients you need. So your innate body knows how to heal itself under the right conditions. And so it's all about providing the right environment for your body to heal itself.
That's fascinating. When I worked in corporate, one of the last roles I had, I hated it. Absolutely miserable. I mean, not just because it's corporate, but I actually put on a stone in a year, and this was only a couple of years ago, and I also got chest infection after chest infection after chest infection. And the moment I left, within a month, I had lost the stone without doing anything.
Yeah.
And I swore down it's because I was so stressed. My body was in some sort of fight or flight response, and cortisone. And I ate badly because I was stressed and I wasn't sleeping well, so I ate more, and it's that cycle.
Right.
And I'd already linked, the better sleep, more water, and once I got those things in position, I then started to go, what am I eating? without the knowledge that you've got, but just starting to listen to my body and go, okay, I don't actually want the chocolate. I realize I don't actually like chocolate. I just think I like chocolate, which is bizarre, right? But my brain
So
goes,
true.
there's sugar in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a habit that's formed, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Habits are huge. I mean, that's a lot of times we think we want these things or we think we need these things. And then if you really just take, time to be mindful, I try to teach mindfulness so much, because when you take a moment to be mindful, you realize, no, I don't really need that. No, I don't really want that. It's just become a habit for me of thinking I want that.
What I think is even harder is breaking those habits.
Yep.
And again, NLP, hypnotherapy can help you with that. Before I knew all this stuff, I decided, I don't know, about a decade ago to stop drinking the full fat fizzy drinks. And for 6 months, I had to make a conscious decision to not drink them. Like I couldn't just quit them. It felt like I was missing out. I was denying myself something, even though I rationally know there's no value in them at all.
Right.
But that habit was so ingrained in me. And now I don't think about it at all. And it's just another drink on a shelf that I can, sometimes I have one because it's the only thing I fancy drinking, but it's not a habit anymore. It's a conscious choice to have as opposed to not have. And it's fascinating. And with the work that you're doing and combining that trifactor of the mind and the soul and the body, I'm guessing you got some really powerful shifts that have happened for people as well as yourself because you put it all together.
Yes.
And when people work with you, what's the sort of the first step that you take with them? Is there a common denominator, or do you have to make it bespoke each time?
There is. I call it the chain breaker method, is where I start in, and that's really the trauma work of, I have basically, it's NLP and hypnotherapy audios that work together. It's a powerful set of 5 that you do in a certain order. And that is really to kind of get you over the hump of the previous traumas. Usually I recommend a 21-day cycle of these 5 in the order that I recommend them. And I do also have, because everybody is a little different, I have other tools in the toolbox that I add on that we can do on an individual basis, like tapping, EMT tapping, journaling. I always recommend some journal work with gratitude. I think that's very powerful. And some people need some reframing done with their mindset. So we work on reframing some things if needed. Them extras are just an individual basis on what that person needs. But the 5 audios are a core essential to my program. And then from there, we look at, what their body needs. Everybody has different sensitivities to food, so I have to take that in account. But I really look at the old saying of let food be thy medicine. So that's where then we start nourishing and, healing that inflammation with, it's always going to be a very low inflammatory diet. And if they're looking to lose weight, then we also take that into account with the calories on what recommendations for eating I give.
Amazing. That's a very comprehensive approach. And going back to your earlier point, I think people forget with trauma that you can't just treat the trauma. Sometimes you have to treat the whole person with all the symptoms. And that's what I love about what you've brought together here, is that package of mind, body, soul to move people forward. And again, based from your own experience, there's no one better than someone who's been through it. So it's just amazing the work you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Going back to your story a bit more, now you are where you are. Do you ever find that you have to take a step back and sort of work on yourself some more? Is that journey ongoing for you as well?
It is ongoing. Yes. I can't say it was a one and done. We're all human, and humans tend to backslip at times. And that's a very natural human thing. And so no one should expect perfection from themselves. And that, a lot of times people think, well, I did the healing work, why am I struggling right now? Well, because trying to better yourself is a lifelong journey. Learning's a lifelong journey. You should never have the attitude that it's a one and done thing. So I mean, I made huge strides for myself with doing that work, but even I will get into funks, and there's times where maybe I'm feeling a little down because I haven't lived up to my own expectations. That's a huge one for people. And then I need to just take some time and step back. Sometimes I have to listen to audios myself again to kind of get me out of the funk. But yeah, I mean, everybody's going to once in a while backslide, and you should never think that your journey is done.
Very, very wise. And I think your point around nobody's perfect and it's an ongoing journey is so true, because we like life to be straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Humans don't like change. We don't really like things to be different, which is ironic because things are always changing and always moving forward. But
Right.
But as an individual, you don't like it. But the other thing you said that I think is really important is that, when you said that when you let yourself down to the standards that you expect, and of course that is one of the biggest sticks that we use on ourselves, is these standards that we all aspire to, and when we don't beat them, when we don't meet them, the way we talk to ourselves, the way we tell ourselves off, we would never do that to a friend, we'd never do that to somebody else, but we do it to ourselves. So it's really important to be aware of it, like you are, and to make sure we keep challenging those sometimes unrealistic standards.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I'll just give a little tip of, one thing that I had to do is called mental house cleaning. So I had the worst self-esteem. Those voices in your head of always telling you you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough. They're constantly flowing in my head. And so I really had to work hard on reframing that state of mind. And one thing with this mental housekeeping that I did is cancel. So if you're alone, I recommend saying it out loud because it's a little more powerful, but obviously you don't want to do this if you're not alone. So when I'm around people and I just notice, those negative voices in my head, I'd sit there and tell myself, cancel. And actually, if you repeatedly tell yourself, cancel, whether it's in your own head or out loud, it actually will retrain your brain, because you're telling your subconscious then that what you're saying is not acceptable. And eventually that subconscious is going to, learn more and more and rewire to say, no, that's not what we want in there. And that's, not okay. So that was actually one thing that I started doing, which may sound a little odd, but it actually helps. So if you're one of them people with them voices, cancel.
Cancel is the way forward. And of course, but there's science behind this, right? So what you're doing is challenging the pattern of behavior that your brain has got used to. And you and I both know that we have this thing called the hippocampus, which says, this is how I should behave, this is how I should think. And what you're doing is cutting right through that. So the brain starts to go, oh, maybe it's not how I should think. And it's so simple, but people, I guess it's so simple, people can't believe that it can work. But like all things, this is a habit. This is a behavioral change that does take time. You have to do it consciously. And sometimes you have to revisit and remind yourself that actually I forgot doing this because the voices had gone away a bit. They're back again. Cancel.
Yep.
Really
Absolutely.
simple. Love that. And so what else do you do? So obviously you've written a book, you do your therapy. Is there anything else that you're involved in?
Just being a mom. I'm busy. I have two of the two older boys. My new husband, when they were small, he ended up adopting them. And
Beautiful.
so I met a wonderful man. And that's the other thing too, is, the healing work is really important too if you want to be able to have good, healthy relationships moving forward. And so that was another thing, is I wanted to be able to have a healthy relationship besides be a healthy mom. So that was another thing that really motivated me to, work on the mental aspect of things. But yeah, so, and then we had one boy together. He's my youngest. The other two are college kids, and the youngest, he's 14. and he's in sports. So other than that, I'm running him around to sports.
Soccer mum, as they say
Yeah,
football mum, we should say in the UK, but soccer for all the American people.
exactly.
That's a full-time job in itself, but you fit so much in. And again, working on yourself, keeping yourself motivated, keeping the family motivated, it's a lot. So finding
It
balance
is.
is important. What do you have any plans for the future of what you want to do with your business next, or where you want to take it?
You know, what I eventually really want to do is have some healing retreats. I would
Lovely.
love to be in a position where I can be a little more hands-on and we're all doing the work together and see like some major transformation within a week's time as a little small group together. I think that would be so helpful for, people to be able to just be right there, get the work in, and see a huge change to motivate them going forward, but also so fulfilling to be able to work hands-on,
Yeah,
in a small environment like that and work with people directly through their change.
I think it'll be wonderful. I look forward to seeing you doing that as well. And one last question. Who inspires you?
Jesus.
Very simple. Excellent. Tonya, thank you ever so much for your time. It's been wonderful having you, and I thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being so open, and thank you for taking the time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was nice talking to you.